Hello and welcome, my friends. So today we are going to do something fun. It's Friday afternoon at about 1:40 p.m. I've got about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and we are going to take a look at the upcoming eclipse, which is going to happen in a couple of days. But even after the eclipse, if you get a hold of this video, please go ahead and watch it, because then you can see. We will see together. This is an experiment to see whether or not what I'm going to tell you has come true or not. So this upcoming eclipse is, said to be by a lot of astrologers to be a big deal on Donald Trump and all that kind of thing. And the truth of the matter is that eclipses do have a tremendous impact on people and on the world, but they don't have an impact on everybody. So it's altogether very possible that there's going to be people who are not going to be, really affected by this. But if you can see in somebody's chart certain things, then you can deduce whether or not this is going to have a strong impact. So this upcoming eclipse is, in fact, I want to double check. But this upcoming eclipse is going to be in the sign of Leo. And again, I'm using Vedic astrology. I'm not using Western astrology. There are some differences, which I'll get into. So this is also a class for those of you who are interested in Vedic astrology. I'm going to talk about some of the differences as it applies to what's happening here. Let me see if I can find. Do I even have the eclipse on here? No, I don't have the eclipse on here. All right. So, but in any case, we are going to be talking about how this eclipse can affect Donald Trump. And this came about because, again, I've been talking about this, and I've did some more research today. And the reason why this is important to me is because this eclipse could potentially have a strong impact on me based on my chart. And the reason for that is because I am in Vedic astrology. I'm also a Leo. And so this eclipse is going to be in Leo in the nakshatra of Magha. And so that is where it's very close to my exact ascendant. So this is probably going to have an effect on me. So in terms of somebody's ascendant, now Donald Trump is also a Leo. And so that means that in his ascendant is going to be affected by this, because this eclipse is going to be transiting over his ascendant, which is his physical body, his physical personality, and his his image. So there are multiple kinds of images, and we're going to talk about how those are here. But when this morning, just out of curiosity, I wanted to look at Donald Trump's chart. So I found his birth information, at least what was available online. And when I punched in the information, I was really intrigued and excited and surprised, because I'm going to show you. This kind of stuff doesn't line up like this in everybody's chart. So now that I see this is potentially this could make him. Let me just say this. The things I'm going to be sharing with you about Donald Trump's chart are, at first glance, very bad news for him. And the majority of people in the world, they allow life to happen to them. And so when you see things like this in somebody's chart, what it means is, if they don't do anything, if they just, like most people on the planet, just walk through their life and let life happen to them and let life dictate how they're going to react, things like this spell bad news. Now, the other side of that, which I'm going to share with you, and this is really what the real benefit of Vedic astrology, that the way that I use it and I teach it, and when I give readings, the real benefit is that if you understand these things and you know how to interact with these forces that are trying to affect you, then you can actually turn things around and have a completely 100% opposite effect. So in Donald Trump's case, I'm telling you here, I'm not saying this because of my political beliefs. I have them, and I try my best not to dump them on the channel here, because I want to let people have their own politics. And but let me just say this what I'm seeing here has nothing to do with my political leanings one way or another. I am simply looking at this from the perspective of a Vedic astrologer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk through this as though Donald Trump had come to me and asked me for a reading. And then I'm going to tell him what he can do and how he can specifically interact with these forces that are trying to get him, as with everybody, these forces are trying to get you to face your karma, your orlog. And the worst case scenario of anybody's chart is that if they are not acting in alignment with themselves, because this whole life is about that. We incarnate into these physical meat bags we call human bodies so that we can be stimulated to learn lessons that will drive us to follow our deepest desire. And so old souls, which doesn't really matter how many times you've been incarnated, if you're if you respond to life in a mature fashion, then these lessons tend to give you a greater ability to interact with the universe and be not only more happy and fulfilled and successful, but a blessing and a benefit to all of life. Those people who go through the very real human lessons, if they're further down on the maturity level, which may have something to do with how many times they've incarnated or how they've just simply chosen to react to life, that will determine their maturity level. If they respond from an immature place, then what tends to happen is these challenges end up being curses or difficulties or problems or whatever. So I want to share with you that Donald Trump, if he made certain key decisions about how he was going to react, and if he was inclined to work with planetary energies in a certain way, if he knew how these planetary energies were trying to influence him to either make a spiritual breakthrough or to experience some major karmic blowback, then you can take a potentially really disastrous chart and turn it into something tremendous. And I'm going to show you here that Donald Trump actually, right now, in this period in his life, has a tremendous opportunity to become extremely spiritually advanced. Now, I don't know what side of the political spectrum you're on. You may be pulling your hair out saying that's not possible, and you may be going, yes, he's my guy. I don't know where you're at. But he can also, if he reacts like most human beings do, because we are here to learn, and most of us are, learning lessons the hard way. If he responds like most human beings, it's going to result in some very disastrous things. And that's just not my opinion. I just looked at his chart and I went, I can't believe what I'm looking at here. So I'm going to share it with you. So so the first thing we're going to talk about, let's just again talk about the eclipse. So, let's do I have the little thing here? I don't have the thing here. So let's talk about what eclipses are. Eclipses are, as you know, when the moon gets in between. It's a new moon, so there's, when you see the moon in the sky, it means that it has some distance from the sun, and a full moon is it's completely opposite the sun, and so it's completely shining back to the earth, its full reflection of the sun. And so the Earth's shadow gets in the way, and that's why the moon gets the crescent shape because the shadow of the earth is eclipsing it. If you were on the moon, you'd see the earth eclipsing the sun. So what happens is that the moon gets in between the sun and the earth, and the shadow of the sun becomes completely eclipsed by the moon. So if we were to be flying by in a spaceship, we really wouldn't, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because, you know, planets and stars cast shadows all over the place all the time. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're right directly underneath it, it's a big deal, especially if you're, you know, somebody who can't or doesn't even know the existence of space. Then all of a sudden the sun is blotted out of the sky and we don't know what's happening. But there, it does have an impact on us energetically, because the influence of the sun and the moon on us, not the obvious, you know, the light of the sun and the light of the moon, that's obvious. But the sun and the moon from an astrological perspective have an impact on us on the two biggest aspects of our being. The sun represents the soul. Here in the heart center, you have your divine eternal soul that lives in your heart center here, and this is your how you consciously interact with this three-dimensional universe, matrix, video game, illusion, however you want to look at it. So our soul also has a strong connection with the ego. Now that is why Western astrology focuses on the sun sign so heavily. It's because Western society, since since its 2,000-year history with astrology, focused on the ego, the self, the soul. Vedic astrology focuses on what's called the rising sign, the ascendant, or the lugna. Lugna, it comes from the same root where we get lug nut. Lug. It's the same root, and it means the same thing. It means to screw into place. So your ascendant is how your soul was screwed into your body, which means that's really how your personality is, and that's how you see your karmas. Okay? So the sun represents the soul, it represents the ego, and so it represents your identity with yourself, especially internally. It doesn't, you know, there are other things that represent how you look to other people, and we're going to talk about that. But in terms of you, how you experience yourself, this is on a deeper level, it's the sun. On a more external level, it's your ascendant. So, Donald Trump's ascendant is going to be impacted by this, as is mine. I'm also a Leo. But what is really interesting is the aspect of, in his chart, the moon and the north node, the north and south nodes of the moon. The north and south nodes of the moon in Vedic astrology are called Rahu and Ketu. Rahu represents all of your ambitions, all of your obsessions, all of your drive, all of your aspirations. So on the positive side, Rahu is what really brings you into physical manifestation, because then let me clear something up in case you're new to my channel. You are not reincarnated because of sins or because of anything bad that you've done or any punishment. The reason that you are reincarnated is because you have unfulfilled desires. Rahu represents these unfulfilled desires. Rahu also represents, the north node of the moon also represents the addictions and obsessions, the desires that can never be fulfilled. And so where Rahu is in your chart will determine where your focus is in terms of what it is you want to get out of life. Okay? So when the north node of the moon and the south node of the moon eclipse the sun and or the moon, then what ends up happening is that if it's the sun, for example, when the sun becomes eclipsed, it means that Rahu is swallowing your soul. It means your obsessions, your addictions, your aspirations, all of the desires that you have that can never be completely fulfilled is swallowing your soul. And so your experience is that, where's my soul? Who am I? It's also your identity, your ego on a deep self. Who am I? You lose that, and then you just be, this is why people freak out. So this is why some people, when they have, either if the eclipse goes over, like in my case, it's going to go over my ascendant, which is my physical body and my personality. So this is going to have a big effect on that aspect of my ego. But if, let's say, somebody is in a time period of Rahu, for example, if somebody's in the time period of Rahu, then an eclipse can have a really deep impact on them. So luckily for me, I'm not going through a Rahu period, and neither is Donald Trump, but you also want to look and see where Rahu is in somebody's chart, because as the eclipse comes through, then Rahu is going to be stimulated, which means the things inside the person's chart are going to be stimulated. Now I'm going to show you that something really unusual happened here with Donald Trump, which this is why I'm saying that there's a potential that he could be a colossal failure. And why, and on a personal note, he could achieve complete enlightenment. It all depends on how he reacts. So now leading up to an eclipse, we start to see, just like anything else, like when winter's coming, we start to feel it coming a little bit, and then it finally hits. Same thing with eclipses. Between the full moon and the actual eclipse, which is, a couple weeks period there, then you have a lot of rumblings of the effects of it. So already we're starting to see that. I talked about this last time. Again, I don't want to push anybody's political buttons, but just from an objective standpoint, regardless of how you feel about the guy, we can all say that Trump's reputation is under assault and has been for a while, and it's getting increasingly more and more. I mean, just today, he lost his main advisor that really helped propel him, which was Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is now out. Now, I don't know yet, but people are saying he's going to go back to Breitbart News, and he is going to whip up that alt-right base against him. So Trump now, his greatest ally, is now going to be his greatest enemy. So we'll see what happens, but just from that, him being fired from his job because of, who knows whatever, he's now in a position where he can do Trump a lot of damage. Trump's reputation has been severely attacked by people because of his response to the violence in Charlottesville. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but regardless of where you are on the spectrum, you can see he's in he has, whether he meant to or not, he ended up putting his foot in his mouth, and now he's in big trouble with a lot of people. He's losing people right and left. He's losing people that were on councils. He lost the business council people. Now he's losing people on artistic councils. There are now, it's very rare. So those of you, if you haven't got this, because I know some people get their news from different sources, but one thing that's very unusual, extremely unusual and extremely damaging to a reputation of a sitting president, is when every single head of the armed forces comes out and speaks against the president. Now, nobody specifically called President Trump by name, but you can definitely see that they were distancing themselves from his statements. And that is extremely unusual because he is the commander-in-chief. He's the commander of the armed forces, and the armed forces, they actually have a legal obligation to stay out of politics and not go against the president publicly, but certainly not have any political voice. And so they came as close as they could legally to denouncing him. So this is a very tarnishing effect on his image. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into his chart here. I'm going to, just out of curiosity, see if there's any people online. I may take some questions. I got a limited amount of time, but I want to get through this. So I want you to take notes about this, and I'm going to, if you're new to Vedic astrology, I'm going to teach you some things that I do in my readings that actually give you tools to take a potentially really disastrous chart and turn it into something really powerful for you. And this is what I've done in my life. The reason I got into Vedic astrology wasn't because, the truth is that astrology was too complicated for me. I mean, it was not easy, and it's still not easy for me. There's so many things about it that I don't completely understand that a lot of astrologers know much more than I do. The books this thick that I had to flip through and all that, and I still have to do that every time I do a chart. But I've narrowed it down because I'm very practical. I just want to know, how can I use these things to make my life better? Just tell me what to do to make my life better, to be happier and more successful and healthier. Just tell me how to do that. And so I focused in, and I worked with Vedic astrologers, and I focused in on the things, and I really studied the things that I could practically stimulate and do in my life to get rid of any negative influences and take the strengths that are there and make them useful for me. So again, I'm going to do this as though I'm doing a chart for Donald Trump, as though he's come to me and asked for my help, and I'm going to tell him what he can do to turn this potential disaster around and make it into something that at the very least could potentially make him one of the most spiritual people on the planet. I know, myself, it's like, what? Donald Trump? Spiritual? If he were to turn himself around based on some of the things that are actually trying to help him, he could become a deeply, deeply spiritual person. So, so let me take a look, as I said, to see if there are any questions. I don't know if anybody's online or not. Yeah, we got 24 people online, so, okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm looking for the questions here. Renee says, will it be beneficial for me to watch, observe safely, look at the solar eclipse this Monday, the 21st? I'd have to look at your chart, but my feeling is, don't be too superstitious about this. If, let's say, the eclipse is going to impact you in a big way, the negative aspect would mean that you would feel really disconnected from your soul, and you might feel some fear, but it's temporary. So the way to deal with that fear, with that feeling of being disconnected, or the emptiness or the panic or whatever sets in, just understand that is all of your fears coming up. So one thing you can do is, get out a pen and piece of paper and write down all of your feelings. And when the eclipse is passed, you can look and you'll see what your deepest fears are. So this is how you can use this positively. Another way is, if you're worried that it's going to affect you negatively, then do what some astrologers say, which is stay indoors and light a candle and pray. Chant to whatever solar deity you want. That, think about positive, happy things. Those things will help offset the potential negative. But being who I am, it's like you might as well, the negative stuff is there, you might as well look at it. The only way it can be negative is if somebody responds out of their fear and does something stupid. So the other thing people say is, just don't make any big decisions. Like me, I'm taking the day off on Monday, and I'm just going to do whatever it is I want to do that makes me happy, so that I can focus on myself. Because I'm going to allow my ego to go through whatever restructuring, destruction, and reconstruction that the universe wants to give me. I'm ready to let go of a lot of stuff. So I'm going to use it for that. So those are some ways that you can do it. Okay, so Lulu Aries Rising says, yes, this is all Vedic. I know almost nothing about Western. So there is going to be some differences. All right. Do you have representation or an assistant to contact regarding future astrology live shows? No. But, when there are ways to go on to YouTube and have it notify you when I'm on live. Sorry, I'm not that organized yet. How about if it's on your ascendant Lord? I'm Libra ascendant. So okay, so I'm assuming this is Vedic. I'm Libra ascendant, and it's happening on my Venus in Magha in the 11th. I also have Rahu squaring Rahu, trying to figure it out. You know, you're actually talking about stuff I'm not sure that I know, but the things like Libra ascendant, Libra, if you've got Venus in Magha, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The things you want to look for is if it's passing over like your ascendant, so it is passing over your ascendant, but you want to look and see, since it is in the sign of Leo, then you go, oh, it's in the sign of Leo. So your Venus. So are you telling me that you are a Leo ascendant with Venus in your first house? I'm not sure what you're saying. If Venus, okay, Venus in Magha in the 11th house, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think it's going to have that big of an effect on you. But again, I would have to look at your chart to really be sure. The other thing you want to see is what Mahadasha you're in. So your Vimshottari Dasha, if you're in a Rahu Vimshottari Dasha, then it's going to also be really impactful. Okay, so are you saying the eclipse will or can have a quickening effect in enlightenment? Absolutely. It is it's, you know, this is how the universe works. You know, the shaman goes through his enlightenment, his or her enlightenment, has, you know, all shamans all over the world, it's always a near-death experience, or they have a vision, or they get sick, or they have a vision where they leave their body and the gods chop them to pieces and put them in a giant cauldron and then pull them out and they're whole again. So this is enlightenment. Enlightenment is always very challenging. So, you know, when Rahu and the eclipse affects you strongly, then it can be very challenging unless you lean into it and say, I'm ready. I surrender to the ego reconstruction. And then go through the pain and the fear and the difficulty and the panic and whatever it is. And if you do that, you can come out the other side, you know, an amazing leader, an amazing person, an amazing spiritual whatever. You know, I'm thinking of Donald Trump. He could turn this around. I don't think he will, but you never know. He could completely turn this around. Let's see. Lulu Aries Rising, the way you can reach me is you can go to info@thundershamanism.com and leave me an email there. You can also, if you want to get a reading from me, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. Okay. Okay, so again, I respond to questions. I'm not here to respond to statements. I know people want to come on and throw their statements on here. I'm happy for you to do that. And I appreciate the nice things, but let's look for questions. Okay, very good. All right, so now let's just go in and I'm going to show you his chart. Okay, so here's his chart, and then I will be talking to you about what it all means. Okay, so I have no idea if you can see that. It's probably really blurry, but I'll do my best to try and explain what's happening. So in that diamond in the top is the first house, and that is Leo. Now he has Mars in the first house, so that makes him physically a fighter. So Mars in Leo makes him a very Leo is the king, and Mars is the soldier, so that makes him a very aggressive king. That means that he is the king, and anybody that gets in his way, he chops them down. He destroys them. Mars is a destroyer. You know, Mars does not want to negotiate. So again, you're going to see some things about Donald Trump, because there's some other interesting things that are going to come out. So in terms of how he interacts with the world, he is the king and he is the soldier. That means he's just a very aggressive warrior. On a good note, that means that he doesn't put up with any guff, and when he goes after something and anybody gets in his way, he at least has the attitude and the ability to achieve whatever he wants, and he can cut down his enemies. I guess we can all say that we have definitely seen that in him. You know, that's really how he made his way to the top. That's one of the ways. The other way is what I'm going to share with you, which is called the Aruda, or the projection. So we're going to talk about that, but we'll get to that in a second. So, and since his ascendant is in Leo, it means that his initial image to the world, his initial personality, his initial interface with his world is going to be affected by this eclipse. Now, that in and of itself, it could just potentially mean that he might go through, and again, I'm just talking about myself here, he might go through a, you know, a personal, you know, look at his personality, you know, and he might go through some challenges, or he might have some awarenesses. But it's the other things I'm going to share with you that are really going to show you that this is a lifelong thing. So in this picture here, we have two charts. Again, you don't have to understand it, just get the basic idea here. I've got two squares in here, one next to the other. I know you probably can't see it, but on the left side is what's called the Rashi chart, or the birth chart, and then on the right side is the D9 chart. And what it is, it's the surgically enhanced view of the 9th house, which has to do with your spirituality as well as your the 9th house specifically isn't about this, but the D9 chart is about you can see a lot of things that has to do with your spirituality, has a lot to do with your relationships if you're married, and it also has a lot to do with the fruits of your life. So on the left side you see the blueprint for somebody's life. On the right side you see, as they get older, you're going to see more of the effects. So how the birth chart comes into manifestation. So like for me, I'm 54. So looking at my D9 chart tells me a lot about where I'm going now. So same with Donald Trump. He's what, 71? So he's deep into his 9th chart, which means that the fruits of the 9th chart are going to come up. Now, what's interesting to note is that if you have this, this is where it's really coming apart for him. If you have the same planets in the same houses in both the birth chart and in the D9 chart, then that shows something that is within the person that will never change. That is something deep within them. So, for instance, let's say if Mars, he's got Mars in his first house. If Mars was in either his first house in the D9 or Mars was in Leo in the D9, that would mean that would be just really something about who he was that never went away. So we've got a couple of things here. We've got things happening in his 4th house and in his 10th house. Now we're going to focus right now on his 10th house, because the 10th house is called the house of your career. But it doesn't mean career like we think of it today. Back, 2,000 years ago, whatever, your appearance to the world was who you were. You were so-and-so, like my last name is Denny. It means Danish. It means that my ancestors were Vikings that came over, and I don't even know which wave of Vikings, but they came over to England. And so, if, for instance, if I had an ancestor whose name was Thor, the English people walking around would have said, "Oh, that's Thor the Danish." Right? That's who you are. That's who you are to the world. That's your 10th house. That's what the 10th house is like. So, let me just show you this again. So, again, if you can't see it, do your best to try and look at it. But the 10th house is basically on the right-hand side of the chart. And in this house, we have Rahu and Sun conjunct, which is an eclipse. That's what an eclipse is. When Rahu conjoins the Sun, it swallows it up. And that's what's going to come. Now, that's his birth chart. Okay, so let me just take a look at that, and then we'll talk about what that means. Okay? Anyway, I'm sorry, it's really blurry. You can't see it. So just trust me. Rahu and Sun are conjunct in his 10th house, in the house of his career, really the house of his not his projection to the world, that's something else, but his representation, how he is just already represented to the world. So Rahu in the 10th house is a very powerful placement, because Rahu again is your obsessions. It's your obsessions and your aspirations. On the positive side, it's your aspirations. It's what you really want in life. On the negative side, it's your obsessions. Things you can never get enough of. So this means that from birth, Donald Trump has been obsessed with power, having influence over other people. Rahu wants to be the king. Rahu swallows the sun and the moon. And the reason for that is that the sun and the moon really are his enemies, because the sun is the soul and the moon is the reflective mind. We're going to talk about how this is how his moon is affecting him, because it's also huge. It's going to explain so much to you. It totally. I looked at it and everything made perfect sense to me once I saw it. Okay, so Rahu is not a hard worker. Rahu wants things done now. He wants to cut corners. He wants to do things the fast, easy way. On the negative side, Rahu becomes a thief, a crook, a murderer, whatever. Rahu, when he is in his most negative, he will do absolutely anything to get what he wants. He has no morals. That's on the negative. So again, if he were to respond to this from a spiritual perspective, then Rahu would be saying to him, hey, listen, you can never get enough of these things. I'm going to hound you with these obsessions for power and money and success. And if you listen to what I'm telling you, that this will never be enough, then you can be a deeply spiritual person. Now, most of us don't do that unless we've been here many, many lifetimes. So that's what's driving him. Now we've got the sun conjunct. So what is the sun? The sun is the soul, but it's also the king, the ruler. And so when Rahu and sun comes together, it means that the sun, which is his ego, becomes completely eclipsed, swallowed up by his obsessions. And the 10th house shows us where his obsessions are. His obsessions are about money, success, power, and fame, because the 10th house is the house of your fame. That's really the best. It's not the house of your career. It's really the house of your fame, what you're known for. So he is completely obsessed with it. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. We have to have ambition to be successful in life. So when people rise to high levels of success, they can be a tremendous. We need them. Without them, the world needs to be led in all kinds of ways. So he is destined for that, and Rahu is working very hard to give that to him. It means that he is going to have problems with the law, with the government, and with his father. We know all of these things are true. He has had and continues to have multiple lawsuits against him. He, as we know, he had a rocky relationship with his father. But when he gets past a certain age, when he gets past, like, say, age 35, then that eclipse over his father moves, and then he has the ability to profit from that relationship. So again, I'm just looking at the chart here. That is what I know about him so far. Okay, so that's his birth chart. Now, what is interesting is that directly opposite Rahu, in the 10th house, Rahu and Sun, is Ketu and the moon. Now, Rahu and Ketu are the same being. And so let me show you very briefly the myth about Rahu and Ketu so you understand how they work with each other. Because Rahu and Ketu are always polar opposites. And they're both the most negative, the most challenging effects in somebody's chart is Rahu and Ketu. They can also give tremendous blessings if you interact with them properly. But if you are on just the normal, immature human response, then they cause tremendous challenge for you. They can cause death, disease, insanity, disaster, all kinds of stuff. So very quickly, here's the myth. In the beginning of the universe, the gods and the demons were stirring up the ambrosial nectar of immortality, and they were using the snake, which is Rahu, they were using the snake, means the spinal column, to stir all this up. And then the gods had come up with a conspiracy. The gods had come up with a conspiracy. They had decided they were going to drink all of the ambrosial nectar themselves, and they weren't going to give any to the demons. Now the demons are there, and they're probably doing all the work because they're more physical than the gods. So they're probably really doing the work because they really want that nectar of immortality. And the gods conspire against them so that they can't have it. And so what they do is they have Vishnu, the god of the heart, the god of the soul. They have Vishnu transform himself into a sexy belly dancer. And so as he's carrying this bowl of the ambrosial nectar and giving it to the gods, he's dancing around. Of course, he's a woman now. He's dancing around and being super sexy and shaking his rear end, like literally shaking his rear end in the demons' faces. And of course, the demons are all about physicality and lust and, fertility and magic and all that. So they're just totally, they're not paying any attention to that ambrosial nectar. But there is the one demon, his name is Rahu, the snake that was used to stir it up. He represents deep knowledge, occult knowledge, all that kind of stuff, all the things connected to a serpent. He dresses himself up, he puts on sunglasses and a hat and a wig, and he tries to look like a god, and he sits down in between the sun and the moon, the soul and the mind. And he then Vishnu passes him the bowl, and he goes to drink it, and as he's swallowing it, he is thinking to himself, I'm going to be king of the universe, I'm going to have everything I've ever wanted, I'm going to have slaves, I'm going to have wives and husbands and mistresses, and I'm going to have money, and he's totally thinking about all the things he's going to have. Who wouldn't? Because he's about to become immortal. Only him and the gods, and he's thinking about he's going to rule over the gods. Right as he's swallowing this, the sun and the moon, maybe his little, he kind of has to pull his glasses up or whatever, and he shows himself. The sun and the moon scream, "He's a demon! Kill him!" So Vishnu pulls out his chakra, chops off his head. Now he's this head. Rahu is the head. All of the ambitions and the obsessions and the addictions and the desires, and he can't fulfill them forever. He can never fulfill any of his desires because he has no body. So all he can do for eternity is just think about all of the things that he could have if only he had a body. And so he takes his revenge out on the sun and the moon, and he swallows them whenever there's an eclipse. The moon is the mind, the ability to reflect the spirit. When he swallows the moon, our minds go blank, and we can't feel our emotions. Our emotions become erratic. We see demons everywhere. This is what happens when the mind is disconnected from the soul. When he swallows the sun, he's swallowing our soul. So we feel like we're dead. We feel like the walking dead. We become afraid. We feel empty. We become obsessed with all the things that we want. Our addictions go crazy. So this is the relationship. So Rahu and Sun are conjunct in his 10th house. Now directly opposite that is Ketu. You already knew that because Ketu is going to be directly opposite that in his 4th house. But guess who Ketu is conjunct with? Ketu is conjunct with his moon. Oh, this is bad. This is a bad combination. I'm not saying this from any personal bias. I'm just telling you as an astrologer, this is potentially very bad. Because this means that his mind and his emotional well-being is being swallowed up by Ketu, who has no head, has no thoughts, he can't see, which means that his emotions are all over the place. And he doesn't know from one moment to the next what he's feeling. It means that he is incredibly easily stimulated by his physical feelings. Whatever goes through his physical body, his mind responds to that immediately. In negative scenarios, this means somebody is schizophrenic. They're a nutcase. But at the very least, it means they're going to be very unstable emotionally. And their mind, the ability to reflect the spirit, the ability to differentiate what things are, he's not even going to be able to, when on the negative side now, on the positive side, something totally other can happen, but on the negative side, it means he's not even going to be able to know what's really happening around him. He won't be able, his mind won't be able to objectively look at the facts in front of him. Now, I've noticed this about him, and there's a phrase that he's used a lot. Many people say, you've heard him say that, whenever he says something, and he'll say something completely wrong. Listen, I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on, he has thrown out statements that are absolutely incorrect. And then his immediate response is when somebody corrects him, is he says, well, many people have said that. That gives you an insight into his mind. He doesn't objectively know what is what. He knows what people have said. Well, 10 people said that and 2 people said that. Well, he doesn't have the ability of mind to go, well, those 2 people are actually looking at the facts and those 10 people aren't. He doesn't have that ability on the negative side. On the positive side, Ketu and Moon can make somebody the most profound psychic and shaman, especially a shaman, the most profound empath. If somebody allows themselves to surrender to this conjunction, and if this conjunction is in different, like if this was in the 8th house or the 12th house, he would be an unbelievable psychic and shaman. I mean, unbelievable. Because his mind would directly go to the other side. Because what Ketu wants to do is rip you out of this physical world. Ketu, if Rahu represents being incarnated into the body, Ketu represents complete departure from the physical. So if that was placed in another house, that would make him the most amazing shaman that the world has ever seen, potentially. But when you have it in this scenario, that means that Ketu and the moon make him very unstable in any home environment that he has. Makes him very unstable with his mother, makes him very unstable with his emotions, his comfort, he's never comfortable. Because his Ketu is constantly making his mind just very disconnected. So on the positive side, that would make him a monk. Would say, listen, I'm never going to be happy in any home. I'm just going to go to the mountains and I'm blah, blah, blah. But when Rahu and Sun are together in the 10th house, that means that his mind and that means that his obsessions and his ego are completely focused on being literally the king of the world. Okay. So, now that in and of itself explains a lot, right? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you in the D9 chart. I'm going to show you in the D9 chart that his life, as he gets older, his life is going to completely flip 180 degrees. So everything that I just said about him is going to be completely turned on its head. And I'll explain to you specifically how that's going to be. So I'm going to do some business and I'll see if there's any questions. And then I'll go deeper into it. So here's, I'll be right back. Okay, so there are a couple of questions here, and let's see what's going on here. All right, so again, I'm looking for questions, not statements. There is a question here that I'm not going to answer. A is asking me about my spiritual beliefs. So to understand that, watch more of my videos. I think it'll be very clear what the answer to that question is. In fact, go to my channel and type in my channel, in the search box for my channel, type in Jesus. And you'll see very clearly what my thoughts are about that. Okay, so Renee Michelle says, I too am in Leo. Does this mean that these same terrible things Trump is going through will be the same for us as well? I'm going to very quickly look at your chart, because Renee Michelle is one of my students. I have done her chart. So let's just take a look and see, because I do so many charts I don't remember people by name. Okay, so you have, your ascendant is in Magha, so your ascendant is also Leo. But here's the good news for you. You have Jupiter in your ascendant. Jupiter is the natural defeater. The one that defeats Rahu is Jupiter. So for you, yes, the eclipse is going to go over your ascendant, but your sun is okay, which is your soul. Your moon is okay, which is your mind. But Jupiter is there, so Jupiter is going to be, your deep spirituality is going to be in conflict with Rahu. So the way you can do that is you can, I believe I've given you some Thunar, some Jupiter mantras. If not, you can, do the Thurisaz rune mantra that I, or just chant Thung. And that is a real opportunity for you to bring some higher awareness to what's happening to your ascendant. So, Renee, you're going to be okay. I think you can actually go out and enjoy these things, enjoy this. I'm not seeing a lot of things happening to you. Now, I happen to have, let me take a look at myself here, because I haven't even really looked at myself today yet. But let me take a look at myself here. And so my moon is not in Magha, which is good. But my moon is in Leo. So my moon, there is a potential for me that my ascendant, which is my personality, and is definitely going to be affected. And there's a potential that my moon, it's kind of like the way I sort of, I live here in Southern California, Los Angeles, near the, sort of near the coast. So I'm not going to get the direct effect overhead. I am going to get, the shadow of it. So that's going to be kind of the same. My mind will sort of get the shadow of it. So that means my mind might be slightly affected, but I don't have to worry about it too much. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about me today. I'm here to talk about Donald Trump. So let me get him back on. All right. So I want to now share with you again. I'm sure you probably can't see this, but let me just tell you what's going to happen. There are two squares. Let's see. There's one on the left, which is his birth, and then there's the one on the right, which is his D9 chart, which has to do with the fruits of this. Now, remember what I said earlier. Let's say if you have the same planet in the same house or in the same sign in both the birth and the D9 chart. That means that's an influence that runs all the way through you, all through your life. So if he had Rahu and Sun, if he had Rahu and Sun in his 10th house in both the birth chart and in the D9 chart, that would mean that would be a theme that would not go away. If the sign placement changed, then it might have a different influence on him. But in terms of, his career, that would mean that he would be fixed. This guy is king forever. But remember, the D9 is the fruits of the birth chart. So what we see in the D9 is going to give us the fruits of what happens through his life. So again, now if we see what I saw here, I hadn't ever seen before, because what is happening is that in his birth chart, in his 4th house, he has Ketu and Moon, which I told you that could cause mental instability, emotional instability, inability to perceive things correctly. This is why, by the way, he can't finish sentences, because Ketu is constantly taking you out of your body. So his Moon is next to Ketu, which means that his mind is constantly being distracted. He's very easily distracted. You've seen this. He's regardless of what you think of him, you see he's very easily distracted. So that's in his 4th house. In his 10th house is Rahu and Sun. Now, in his D9 chart, Rahu and Sun are conjunct in his 4th house, and Ketu and Moon are conjunct in his 10th house. So Ketu gives the opposite of Rahu. So if Rahu in his birth chart and Rahu and Sun are giving him a complete obsession and giving him in the 10th house the ability to literally become the king of everything, when you flip that around, you put Ketu and Moon there, Ketu is then going to seek to destroy his reputation. So instead of the obsessed king, you have the emotionally imbalanced person. So again, Rahu and Sun in the 10th house means a huge reputation. This is why he has been untouchable. Again, I don't care which side you're on, he has been untouchable. He has said things, just take one of the things that he said that's been controversial. If you give it to any other politician, it would have destroyed their career for life. But like he said, he could literally go into Times Square and bang, bang, and nothing would happen. He's totally right about that. That's Rahu and Sun in the 10th house. But Ketu and Moon in the 10th house is going to reverse that. So not only, if Ketu and Moon were in the 10th house, that would mean that on the spiritual side of things, he would say, you know what, I've already achieved everything in past lives. I don't care about my reputation. That could make somebody very famous simply because they don't care. And they would be a master of whatever it was in their 10th house. But they wouldn't care about it. And you know, people who don't care about fame are the ones that end up getting really famous. But since what's happening is that Rahu and Ketu are switching places, that means that all of the effort that he puts into becoming the king of the world is now, Ketu, as he gets older, is going to tear that away from him. And so what we have seen a man, as he has gotten deeper into his presidency, you see here, I don't care what side you're on, you see here, you can say that you could say this, and this is true, you could say that the media is bashing him and destroying him. That is Ketu. Ketu is going to come in and destroy your reputation, because Ketu says reputation means nothing. Ketu says I want complete. If I'm in your 10th house, that means I want you out of being famous. If your Moon is in there, it means that his mind, with Ketu's influence, will be unable to figure out how to be successful and famous. He's going to lose his mental and emotional ability to figure out what to do next. Now, I can only tell you what I've seen so far. I got to be careful what I say here. I can only tell you what I've seen so far, but as he's gotten deeper into his presidency, he has become less and less effective to deal with the problems that have come to him about his reputation. Leading up to his presidency, he was bulletproof. In fact, the stronger that he was his brash, normal self, the more successful he was. But now he is in office. He is the king now. So now he's made it. So now if we see this, and as he's getting older, Ketu and Moon are now going to switch places with Rahu and Sun. So this is why I say, you know, he has the potential to be a colossal failure among the kind we have never seen before, as he would say. He could be a colossal failure, the likes of which the world has never seen. But if he were operating from a purely spiritual standpoint, and if he were to allow this to flow, he would be the most spiritual, the most famously spiritual man on the planet. He would be the man walking around saying to all of the world leaders, listen, you guys, being king or being prime minister or president, it really doesn't mean anything. Let's focus on what's really important, because your station in life really doesn't mean anything. He does kind of have that, he kind of ran on that, which is what made people so attracted to him, and still attractive. That's what makes him attractive to a lot of people today, because he just goes up against the establishment. Now that's Rahu in the 10th house, actually. Rahu says, let's take down, let's destroy all those in power, and let's take their place. That's what Rahu says. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you now even deeper. And this is what I give. When I give Vedic readings, what I give people is these tools to know what the planets are doing. And if you listen to what the planets are doing, they will actually take these challenging situations and make them tremendously huge blessings for you. So I'm going to show you how, if he had listened to what the planets are trying to do for him throughout his life, how he would have achieved, he really, just on a personal level, he would have achieved tremendous enlightenment, perhaps, a complete enlightenment. But before we do that, let me take a look and see if there are any questions here. So, is the moon purely a mental force? No emotions? Pearl B. McCoy, the exact opposite. The moon is your mind and your emotions. They're what we call the mind in Western. Actually, there's a lot of confusion. So I see confusion, at least from what I see in your statement. The mind, from the spiritual perspective, is not your brain or your intellect. The mind is the reflection of the sun. It's the reflection of the moon. The reflection of the sun. The moon is the reflection of the sun. So the mind reflects the spirit. So the mind represents meditation, but the moon also represents emotions. So when the moon is eclipsed, it means that people's emotions are very erratic. They can have mental instability, emotional instability. When people's moons are happy and strong and full, it means that they have an objective. They feel fulfilled emotionally, and they feel very peaceful. They have a very peaceful, meditative mind. So the moon is, I'm not going to say a purely emotional force, but it is the emotions and the reflective mind. What you're talking about, the mental force, is the intellect. And the intellect and the mind loves the intellect, but the intellect rebels against the mind, because the intellect wants to see things in two dimensions. It wants to divorce itself from emotions. So people who are very intellectual aren't connected to their emotions. Okay? So I think I answered your question. All right, so again, let me do some business here, and then I want to get my thoughts together. I think I have a couple other things to say before I go deeply into the other aspects of the planets that really are trying to either, if you listen to them, they're trying to help you. If you don't listen to them, they will destroy you. Okay, so what I wanted to do before I go into the aspect of the planets and how to, how to work with the different planets that are really trying to help you, I want to again talk about conjunctions, because this is important. So a conjunction is when two planets are very close together. And when they're very close together, it means that they either influence each other, depending on the planets and the house and all that kind of stuff, or they fight with each other. Now, Rahu and Ketu are planets that magnify the planets that are around them. And so they always, whenever they get conjunct with a planet, they always have potentially very negative effect on those planets. At the very least, it makes it difficult for the benefits of those planets to come forth. On the positive note, it means there's a very strong influence for you to get very spiritual in connection to whatever those planets represent and what they do. Again, most people don't do that. Most people just let everything happen to them and they don't know. But, this is why it's important to look at your chart. And I found this out. The things that were cursing me in my chart are actually my blessing, because, for instance, in my chart, I have moon in the first house in Leo, but my moon was a new moon, which means that my mind, since my moon is in my first house, it means that my emotions and my mind are very connected to my body, which is why I always have done sports, surfing, martial arts, all that kind of stuff. I do things because if I don't move my body around, I can't balance my emotions. But because I was born on a new moon, it means that my moon is like hungry all the time. It's leaking energy. Moon represents life force energy. Moon in the first house means life force energy in the body. So I was actually constantly drained energetically on a life force energy level. Now that's why I do so much Qigong. And that's why when I do Qigong, I feel this huge rush of energy, because that energy goes directly into my body. So that's why I have a lot of energy in my body. So you see how this works? That could have been a curse if I didn't know that, and if I didn't move, and if I didn't exercise, and if I didn't do energy work, then as time went on in my life, I would get more and more emotionally drained and mentally drained and physically drained. So the curse can be turned around into a positive. And so now I'm a Qigong teacher, and a lot of people consider me a Qigong master. It's because I turned my negative into a positive. Does that make sense? Okay, so now let's go deeper. So conjunction now. All right, so in order to find out, in a conjunction, you have to find out which planet has the lowest number of degrees, because that planet is going to be the one who's going to basically win in that fight. If the two planets are fighting each other, that's the one that's going to have the most influence. So in terms of Donald Trump's mind and his emotions, K2 has the lowest degrees. Now, if the moon had the lowest degrees, it would mean still K2 would have a negative impact, but it would mean that his mind would want to overcome that instability. And especially if he did like Qigong, or if he did moon mantras, or if he went out into the full moon, then his emotional and mental state would actually have an ability to overcome the instability that K2 does. Because remember, K2 wants to take you out of whatever it is he's associated with. So if he's associated with the mind, it means he wants to take your mind out. So that's why, again, people with K2 and moon together, they can't focus on things for very long. Same thing with Mars. If you have Mars in there, then you're constantly moving around. But K2 is like, it's more like the mind goes, it's like if you have a bad connection on your TV and the snow comes in, it's just like the static keeps coming into the emotions and in the mind. If his moon was in the lowest degrees, it means his mind would be working to overcome that. But he's got K2 at the lowest degrees. So K2 already, whenever he comes into contact with whatever, he does his negative mojo on whatever planet he's connected to. But since he has the lowest number of degrees, it means that it's very difficult for Donald Trump's mind to stay focused. No matter how hard he tries, he just can't. Because K2 has the the power. Now, if he were my client, I would be telling him ways that you can overcome that is to do worship the moon, but most importantly to worship Ganesha, because Ganesha represents Ketu. And Ganesha would give you the spiritual understanding. Something like that would make him a very deep psychic person where he could, with his mind, go deep into the spiritual realms. But without that, it just means that Ketu is just going to make your mind just blank out. So that means that when he is under emotional duress, he becomes less and less capable of not only balancing himself emotionally, but paying attention and focusing mentally. And I don't know where you get your news from, but I can tell you that the so-called mainstream media is talking a lot about how people within the White House are saying he's becoming emotionally unhinged. I mean, he's becoming, you know, and people have talked about his emotional fitness. Well, this chart is saying that that's a real possibility for him. All right, so now let's go to Rahu and Sun. So again, the same rule applies. If you've got Rahu and Sun together, the planet that has the lowest amount of degrees is the planet that's going to have the most influence. So this could potentially be very, give somebody some power to overcome this problem, because if Sun had the lowest degrees, it would mean that the soul would have, in this argument between the obsessions and the addictions, it would mean that the soul, the spiritual self, the ego could rise to the top and say, no, I am going to control this and I'm going to use this to my benefit. But that's not the case. You've got Rahu with the lowest amount of degrees. They're still very close, which means the conjunction is huge, which literally means that Rahu is swallowing the Sun and he has the control. So that means we've got on two sides of this that Rahu and Ketu are running the show. Now on top of that, you take that, let's see, from your perspective, the 10th house and the 4th house. This is his fame, and this is his home life and his mind. When they switch places, that means that Ketu is now in control of his 10th house, which means that Ketu, his mind, he will not have the mental ability to stop Ketu from completely destroying his reputation. Again, I don't care what side you're on. If it's his tweeting, everybody says, you know, I wish he didn't tweet so much. I wish he didn't do that. I wish he just focused on the job. I wish he didn't let the senators or the media drag him down. You're saying the same thing. You're saying that he can't help but destroy his own image. Now that he's president, everything he does is, as time goes on, he is going to be working to destroy his own reputation. He's his own worst enemy. I'll give you one example. When he fired Comey, he didn't have to do that. But, you know, for those of us, whoops, I just slipped. For those people who had a lot of doubts about why he fired Comey, he could very easily have just stuck with, no, it had to do with the Clinton thing and the email scandal and all of that. It's got nothing to do with the Russia. That has nothing to do with it. But what did he do? He went on national television. He himself went on and said he fired Comey because of the Russia investigation. So he completely undercut himself, and not only because of that, because he went after Comey publicly, Comey set it up so that now we've got Mueller in charge of this investigation that has no oversight, and he can't stop it. And, you know, the FBI, if it was just Comey investigating, the FBI was not in a position to bring charges against him. Mueller has the ability to bring criminal charges against him. So Mueller is there because Trump he sabotaged himself unwittingly. Trying to help himself out, he sabotaged himself, and because of his own actions, Mueller is there now. Even if you want to say, well, you know, the establishment is against him, and the Democrats are against him, and the media is against him, even with all that being true, he still played a huge role in that. So if that ends up bringing him down, it will be because of this scenario. Ketu and Moon are now in his 10th house, which is Ketu. His mind is literally, when he tries to get himself out of problems, whatever he says, he's going to be shooting himself in the foot. So that's the negative side of that. I already explained the positive. If he decided in this eclipse, if he had that moment of clarity where he said, you know what, this doesn't mean anything, being president means nothing, being, you know, I've been wasting my time, which is what Ketu really wants to teach him. Ketu wants to teach him, listen, being king of the world means nothing, having money, having power, having success means nothing. It does nothing for you, it won't make you happy. Let's separate ourselves from all of that. If he listened to that, then he would be the most famous person for bringing true spirituality to the world. Question is whether or not he can do that. The cards are stacked against him because, you know, you've got Rahu and Ketu both in charge of these conjunctions. So it's not impossible by any means, but listen, there is definitely a reality where this is happening. Because if you can imagine it, science says that there is a reality where this is happening. So there is a reality where Donald Trump flips and becomes the most famous spiritual person in the world. But we'll see what happens. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the other thing I promised to talk about, which is the planets that if he really looked at them, and this is what I give people in Vedic astrological readings. And I'll tell you exactly what I would tell him if he were my client. So I'm going to do some business and then see if there's any questions, and then I'll get to that. So let's just watch this enjoyable, fun little movie. I put so much time and effort into these opening movies, it's a shame that they don't get played more, so I'm going to play this one while I take a break. Okay, so now let's get into the other part of it. So again, just to recap, we're looking at two of Donald Trump's charts. We're looking at, in the Vedic astrology, we have the birth chart, and then we have the what's called the Navamsha, or the 9th divisional chart. The birth chart represents the blueprint for your life. The 9th divisional chart represents, among other things, it's a very influential chart, but among other things, it represents how the birth chart is going to evolve over time. And the D9 chart becomes especially relevant as a person gets older in their life. So as they come to the end of their life, the D9 sort of eclipses the birth chart. Okay, that's when people mature, this is what happens. So we have this eclipse coming in Magha, which is in Leo. Trump is a Leo ascendant, so that means that By the way, he's got Mars in there as well. Is Mars in Magha? Yep. Oh, man. So Mars is his ability to fight. So, now that I look at this, with all of this stuff, it is very possible that the eclipse, by the way, Rahu and Mars are total enemies, complete enemies. When Rahu, the eclipse, goes over Donald Trump's ascendant, it's also going to transit over his Mars. So that means that his ability to fight is going to be severely limited. So Mars in the first house in Leo makes the warrior king, the king who demolishes all of his enemies. So when it's going over his ascendant, it's going to affect that, his personality, that, you know, the expression of his personality. But if it's going over Mars, his ability to fight, watch, he's either going to flip out and just start lashing out in all directions, or he will completely give up, or his ability to fight will be diminished. But at the very least, his ability to fight, he will feel like he can't fight. Like that is going to be very threatened. So I just noticed that just now. Okay, so as the eclipse goes over, it's going to stimulate all the things connected to Rahu, which, as we pointed out in his 10th house in his birth chart, Rahu and Sun are conjunct, which means that he is the completely obsessed king who will do absolutely anything to achieve the highest fame and power in the world, which he has done. You can't get any more powerful and famous than the President of the United States. There really isn't anybody in the world that can top that. But the D9 chart has Rahu and the Sun conjunct, flipped in his 4th house, and what takes the place of Rahu and Sun in his 10th house is Ketu and Moon. Rahu and Ketu are the opposite sides of the snake. Rahu is his obsessions. Ketu is that which tries to destroy whatever Rahu is accomplishing. So that means now, as he gets older, Ketu is trying to destroy his reputation. So that means, according to this chart, he is destined to rise to become the king of the world, and then his reputation will be completely destroyed, and he will fall in disgrace if he just simply responds to it like a normal person. Now, if he were my client, I would say, here's what you can do to completely turn this around. So, the first thing that I'm going to look for is I'm going to look for what's called the Atma Karaka. This is the planet in his birth chart that has the highest number of degrees. So it doesn't matter what house it's in, it just means that this planet is overseeing everything, and it has the karmic lesson. So, as we look at his chart, the planet that has the highest number of degrees is the Sun. 29 degrees. It's almost completely got, that's as high as it can get. So that means that the Sun is trying to give him a karmic lesson. So when somebody has the Sun as their Atmakaraka, it means that, once again, it just intensifies the king. So the fact that he's a Leo with a Sun as Atmakaraka means he really sees himself as the king. See, now I've got Moon as my Atmakaraka, so Moon softens that. Even though I've got a huge ego, and I do, even though I've got a huge ego, I do have this soft emotional side that wants to calm all that down, and so kind of offsets that. But when you've got Sun as your Atmakaraka with Leo and Mars in your ascendant, it means that you have a huge ego. Now, the karmic lesson of Sun as Atmakaraka says, your karmic lesson is you have to learn how to treat your subjects as your equals. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Can anybody say that he has done that effectively? I mean, one of the things he's known for is he attacks everybody. So he is definitely on the wrong side of this karmic issue. It means that he is going to pay a price for that. The karmic lesson for people who have Sun as their Atmakaraka is, if you do not treat the world as the beneficent ruler who tries to bring the masses up to your level, they will rise up against you. Okay? So that's one thing. So the first thing I would tell him is, hey, listen, you have got to really adopt a humble attitude, and you have got to treat everybody, even your enemies, and lift them up. If you're the king, and I would stoke that ego, and I would say you're definitely meant to be a king. If you're the king of your environment, it is absolutely imperative that you be the beneficent king, otherwise everybody's going to revolt against you. So we can see that happening. You make up your own mind about that. All right, so the next thing that I want to look for now is I want to see, okay, now we have a basic idea of some of the things that are going on. Let's see what planets are really trying to help him and in what ways. So, okay, it's 3 o'clock, so good, I got about an hour. Okay, so the first thing I look for, and I won't tell you how to do this, but you can figure it out. I'm going to go look for what's called the Ishta Devata. Ishta means chosen. Devata means deity, but in this case we're talking about the planet. So we're going to find out what planet has chosen to help him through this life. So the Ishta Devata is your best friend. It vibrates on the level of your soul and your conscious mind. So that means whatever planet and whatever deities are associated with that planet of the Ishta Devata, that means that you don't have to do anything to get their blessing. You don't have to worship them. You don't have to do mantras. You don't have to do rituals. They're your best friend. You can literally call them up on the phone and say, I'm sick. Can you come pick me up? I need a ride to the airport. Your best friend. They will do anything for you. They're there for you. You just literally wake up out of bed and just call that deity. So I'm going to go find that what it is. So what I do is I look in the D9 chart and I find his Atmakaraka, which is in the 4th house, conjunct Rahu. So I find his sun is in his 4th house, and I look at the 12th house from that. So the 12th house from that is an empty house with, listen to this, with Venus. So the planet that is lording over it, it's in Libra, which is the sign of, equanimity and equality and, meeting people halfway and all that. And that is lorded over by Venus. So since there's no planet in there, it means that Venus is his Ishta Devata. That means that if Donald Trump woke up every morning and worshipped Venus or any deities associated with Venus, and what is Venus? Venus is the embodiment of compassion and love, and this is why he has this intuition. He has this intuition to be a deal maker. He talks about it all the time. I would negotiate with them. I would make deals with them. His soul wants so badly to be the peacemaker. That's what Libra is. It's, among other things, it's the peacemaker. It's also the businessman who finds a way to make great deals. And what is he? He touts himself as the deal maker, the art of the deal. So what we're seeing is his soul is trying to come out and trying to make these deals. And everybody sees it in him. The people who support him say he can make deals. He can get in there. He'll make deals with Putin. He'll make, right? He said, I would negotiate the hell out of North Korea. That's because his soul really wants to do that. But in order to do that, you have to focus on that. So here we have this juxtaposition of in his... See, I'm learning about this as I'm going along with you. In his ascendant, he has Leo with Mars in there. He is... His personality is that he is the absolute conquering king that will chop all of his enemies to pieces. But Venus, the peacemaker, the lover, the negotiator, is saying, but hey, we could, why don't we, okay, why don't we, so if he woke up every morning, so this is what I would tell him. I would tell him that what is going to make your soul happy is if you worship Venus. if you worship Lakshmi, the goddess of love, the goddess of, you know, if you focus your entire life on truly being the peacemaker everywhere you go, you will be extremely successful. But if you listen to Mars in your first house, that is going to completely clash with what your soul wants, and it's going to make you very unhappy. That's what I would tell him. So I would tell him what deities were connected to Venus and what he could do to soften his Mars and all that. In any case, I won't go into all of that stuff, but that's the first thing I would do. All right, so this is, I haven't done this yet, so we're going to find out. I'm having so much fun. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at what his Dharma Devata is. Now, Dharma is your path. It is your orlog. It is your destiny. And by destiny, what I mean is what your soul wants to achieve in order to make this a better place. I can't believe this. So this is the planet that if Donald Trump worshipped this planet and the deities associated with this planet, this would be how he could leave his mark on the world and make this world a better place. Not only that, this is how, by walking this path, whatever this planet is going to say his path is, if he walked this path, the whole world would thank him and would bless him. It would bring him tremendous luck. Okay? So this is the planet that wants to work with your unconscious mind. And what is your unconscious mind? Your unconscious mind is all of your fears, all of your attachments, all of your delusions, all of your self-sabotage. And so when you work with the Dharma Devata, you work with a planet and or beings and deities associated with this planet want to then take all of that unconscious garbage that comes from past life, the stuff that's going to create all the negative karma in your life, because you have karma on the one side and you have dharma on the other. So the dharma is trying to get the best out of your karma. So there's good and bad karma. There's bad karma, which means when you do something negative, you get a negative result. Makes perfect sense. You break the law, you go to jail. You give somebody a gift, they're going to love you and give you a gift back. Right? That's karma. Dharma says this is how you should walk. You personally, how you personally should walk in this life to get the blessings of the universe. So now, I don't know what it is. Let's see what the planet is. All right, so Venus is 12th from his Atmakaraka in his D9th. So now we look for the 9th planet. So I count backwards: 12, 11, 10, 9. Oh, I'm not making this up. Okay, sorry. I couldn't have made this up if I tried. Okay, so in his in his 9th house, let me see, let me make sure I got this right. 12, 11, 10, 9. His 9th from his Atmakaraka is the 8th house in his D9. The 8th house is the house of transformation. It's one of the houses of death. It's the house that goes from death and resurrection. It's the house that is going to bring the most intense personal transformation in your life. If there's going to be a major issue in your life, the 8th house is going to tell you how this is going to totally transform you, either really super challengingly or make you, super spiritual. So he has in his 8th house there, which is the 9th from his Atmakaraka, is Capricorn. And so the planet that lords over Capricorn is Saturn. That means his Dharma Devata is Saturn. Saturn is the judge. Saturn is karma. Saturn is past life. Saturn is disease, misery, poverty. What this means is that if Donald Trump were to, so for instance, if you want, one of the ways that you can in your life, if you want to worship Saturn in your life in terms of the path, it means you have to give. Saturn says you go to the old folks' home. It says you give to the poor. It means that you go to hospitals. It means that you live your life in charity to others, giving to the people who are oppressed, helping the masses, helping the poor. This is why the poor see him as their savior, because they intuit, and now I'm getting sad, they intuit that his path is to save them, to give them jobs, to give them security, to give them health care. That is his job. They sense it in him. That's why they voted for him. That's why no matter what he does, they say, I know that he can pull this off. Just give him a chance. Just give him a break. He can do it. Because his job in this life is to help them. That's his dharma. And so his challenge is, I would tell him, without all this emotion, I would tell him, your challenge is that you want to be this warrior who kills everything in his sight in order to get what he wants. You will do absolutely anything to achieve success. You are destined for it. But your dharmic lesson in this life is to not do it for your own ego, but to do it to bless the masses. If you give your life in service to the masses, you will be the king of the world. You'd be emperor of the world. That's what his chart wants him to be. But there's so much influence trying to take away from that. Okay, so I think that speaks for itself. Now let's go to the next planet that I would look at, which is called the Palana Devata. So I have no idea what this is going to be. The Palana Devata is the planet that works with your subconscious mind, which has to do with intending your physical needs, like your job and your home and your money and all that kind of stuff. So this will be interesting. I have no idea what it's going to be. So in order to do that, I find the planet in his birth chart that has the second highest number of degrees, which is Moon, at 28 degrees. So then I move over here to his D9 chart, and I find Moon, which is in his 10th house, conjunct with Ketu, and I count 6. 6 houses from that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't make this up. The planet in the 6th house from his Moon in his D9 chart is Jupiter. What does that mean? That means that the way that he can truly get the things that he needs in his physical life is to worship spirituality, deep spirituality, the priest. That means for him to be truly successful, and bear in mind, this isn't talking about how much money you have. You can have a lot of money and be super poor. You can have a lot of money and be sick and miserable. This is the Palana Devata says, this is what I want to get your needs met so you'll be happy. You'll have all of the things that you need in order to be happy. So in order for him to get happiness in his stuff, even with all of the money and the properties and the buildings and the businesses and all the stuff that he owns, in order for him to get true happiness of it, he has to worship, deeply worship some kind of Jupiterian deity like Jesus, Thunor, aspects of Shiva, the highest spirituality. So Jupiter is the spirituality that says, I am here to bless you, compassion, love, equality. Jupiter is a very giving, very generosity, giving and giving and giving and giving. So you make up your own mind whether you see Donald Trump as being a generous person or not. See, the thing is that we have all seen this in him. There are times, especially people who have talk to him personally, say, you know, in person, he's a really kind person. I mean, he does stupid things, but we see this in him. This is why there are no such thing as bots or, you know, soulless people. Everybody here is trying to get the best that they can out of this world. Everybody here is trying to learn. And all of us, no matter how bad our charts are, there are aspects in our chart that if we listened to them could bring us such satisfaction and happiness and blessings to others. So, you know, if I had, you know, Donald Trump at 20 years old had hired me to do his chart, and if he had listened to me, I could have not only given him what to do to avoid this potential disaster that could happen to him, but at the same time I could show him how he could be such an amazingly influential healing force on this world. I didn't know this when I started looking this up. What got me excited was I saw that, you know, Rahu and Ketu had switched places in his birth chart in his D9, and that's what said, oh, that explains everything. This other stuff I'm just sharing with you now, I didn't know I was going to find this. It's amazing. So there's hope for everybody. And so there's hope for Donald Trump. Regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, there's hope for Donald Trump. If when this eclipse goes over him, which is going to have ripple effects on him afterwards, if he, you know, if he finds himself feeling really insecure and his fears come up and everything comes up, and if he turns himself around and he says, you know what, I'm willing to just give up everything I have. I don't care. I'm willing to go and apologize and turn around and do what I'm supposed to do. If he really does that, if he's able to get out of his own self-preservation instincts, which we all have, which might lead him down a path of ego, he could surprise the whole world. But if he, like most people on this planet, if he simply reacts to the pressure of what's coming at him, then if that happens, then we are going to see a colossal failure, the likes of which the world has never seen. I predict that if he responds negatively, especially with Mars in there, Mars getting hit by this eclipse, at the very least I can guarantee you he is going to think very seriously about resigning. Because when Mars gets debilitated like that, he's not going to want to fight anymore. He's going to want to give up. So we'll see. We'll see. This could be very, very destructive for him. But as I said, all of the influences there, Saturn is there, and Venus is there, and Jupiter is there. They all want to help him. So, you know, for those of you, if you're interested in working with me astrologically, I would be able to look at this and figure out which mantras, which planets, which deities, which rituals. So, for instance, let me just give you a ritual for Donald Trump. Let's see here. Let me pick. Let's just go by his dharma. Okay? His dharma devata, his path. How? Because listen, here's the thing. With Saturn as his dharma devata, that means if he does not listen to Saturn telling him to give his life to the poor and to the sick and to the masses, if he doesn't give, like donate his money, like seriously donate money to like hospitals and you know, jobs and the sick and all that, if he doesn't do that, Saturn is going to make, in this life or in the next life, Saturn is going to make him one of the, well, I don't want to say it. You can fill in the blank. Saturn is representative of the poor, the sick, the miserable, the downtrodden, the worker. Saturn is going to say, listen, man, I got to teach you a lesson about this. You didn't listen to me. You had an opportunity to do this, and if you don't, You're going to have to learn the lesson. So either in this life or in an upcoming life, if he doesn't listen to Saturn, and if he doesn't start doing what Saturn wants, that's what his chart is saying. Okay, so, but I'm hoping the best for him and for us, because he is the leader of the free world. It is my sincere hope for him that he listens to the lessons that are coming from this eclipse, because he could bring us all up. He could bring us all up into the next, to an Eden. He has that ability. He has that ability, if he chooses to do that. But in order for him to do that, he's going to have to listen to Saturn and Venus and Jupiter. Okay, he has to stop listening to Rahu and Mars and the negative aspect of the sun. Otherwise, Ketu is going to come in and completely, totally destroy his reputation to the world. So there's one last thing before we go. Now, this is the most important thing. I almost lost it. I got so into all that stuff, which was very revealing. But here's the last thing. If somebody were to come to me and say, hey, listen, Mike, I only have 5 minutes. Could you give me the most important thing in my chart? I just need the one thing that I need that's going to make everything. You just tell me the one thing. Without thinking twice, I would look for what is called the Aruta, which is the projection. So the projection actually means reflection, but I call it projection. The reflection is how the world sees you, whether you like it or not. And yeah. So the reflection is how the world sees you, whether you like it or not. So there's a way to figure that out. So let me explain to you what that means. It means that, for instance, I'll tell you my Aruta. I've told you that my first house is moon. I've got a debilitated moon in Leo, which means that I see myself as this emotional king, but my moon is debilitated, so I see myself as this very emotionally fragile, vulnerable king. But that's not how the world sees me. How the world sees me is Mars in the 3rd house in Libra. The 3rd house is communication. Mars is the warrior. 3rd house is hands. So the world sees me as a fighter who brings peace to the world. And I communicate that. 3rd house is communication. So the universe, the world sees me, whether I like it or not. The world sees me as somebody who fights for spiritual equality, who fights to bring peace and communicate that peace to the world. Does that describe me in your experience? I get emotional talking about it. But that's not how I see myself. So what's important, I learned this from a Vedic astrologer who said, here is your Aruda is the spiritual warrior. You need to dress like a spiritual warrior. Every time you go out in public, every time you talk to people, especially if you're doing something that involves your career, you have to dress like the spiritual warrior. That's what I do. That's how people see me, whether I like it or not. So, how does the world see Donald Trump? Okay, so we look for the sun. So the sun is in the 10th house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so here's we got two things going on. His actual reflection is Aquarius. What is Aquarius? Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius is about equality, bringing the masses up and bringing them, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, right? To bring everybody up so that we're all equal. To get rid of this Piscean attitude of, the king and the peasants. The Aquarian age is about everybody being an individual and yet working together as a group to help everybody else come up. It's a group mentality where even within the group you have your own identity. So now the rules are that can't be it, but that's really the reflection that wants to come through. But because of certain things that I won't go into, his actual reflection is what we've already said. The ruthless king who will do anything to run the world. So what I would tell Donald Trump is I would say, listen, even though everybody sees you as this unbeatable, untouchable king of the world, there is this influence that people unconsciously want to see you as the bringer of the Aquarian age. So, which is what? The negotiator, making deals. He talks about that all the time, making deals. If he were to actually do that, because that's how people, just regardless, people want to see him that way. If he were to present himself that way and to really live that, the whole world would build him up in that. So that's what I would tell him. I would tell him, you've got to go present yourself to the world as the one who is going to bring peace and equality to all of the masses. Because that's how people want to see him. And again, that's why, look who voted for him. The working class. And I've talked to a lot of people who voted for him. People, and this is an interesting thing, I won't get into too much detail, but people on the surface who you would think would never vote for him because of either religious or ethnic or social status or all that. There are some people who really saw in him something that was really wonderful that they wanted to bring to the world. And no matter what, you can't talk them out of that. They still see him that way. And what they see in him is this negotiator who comes out of the masses, the king who rises out of the masses, who is the friend of the masses, who will get rid of, that's Rahu wants to destroy the establishment, who will get rid of the establishment and bring equality and peace and satisfaction. And he, people want him to make peace with North Korea and with Putin. You remember in the beginning? People were saying, yeah, he'll make peace with Putin, he'll make peace with North Korea, because he'll negotiate, because he wants to do that. On a spiritual level, that's his dharma, and that's what he secretly wants to do that. Okay, so those are the things that I would tell Donald Trump. Of course, without all of the laughing and all that other stuff, I would, of course, be very civil to him, and I would tell him what would be most helpful for him. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions here. All right. I've got about 25 minutes, so let's see if I can get through this. So, are the higher degrees in your birth chart more mature aspects? Okay, so now you're asking me questions I may not have the answer to. I'll tell you what I do know. When planets have higher degrees in the chart, it just means that they're more full and they have a more objective effect on the chart. Planets that are in lower degrees, again, we're talking about generalities because some of this can be, the lower the degrees, the planet is waking up. The higher degrees, the planet is fully awake, or as you get really high, then the planet is starting to get old and fall asleep. So it just means the higher the degrees, the more likely it's going to have a more objective look down on your chart and have an objective effect. So in order to really look at it, you've got to see the placement of it, the sign it's in, and you have to look at other things too, but generally speaking, that's what it is. Okay, Moon Augustine says, my Mars is in Leo, I'm in Spain here, the eclipse will be partial, but now I wonder, may it affect me anyway? Of course it's going to affect you, but it will. I don't know what house Leo is in. That would tell me a lot. So again, you have to look at everything in somebody's chart. So at the very least, your strength, your energy might be affected by the eclipse. So the thing to do is to worship Mars, or to, really take, or just to rest, just to take the day off and rest, save your energy and do something healing. See, here's the main thing about what to do on an eclipse. Do the thing that's going to be most healing for you. And use it as a day to really focus on yourself and just go inward. And, whether you're outside looking at it and celebrating it or doing a ritual, or whether you're just staying at home, watching Netflix and eating popcorn. Some people will say you should fast on that day and just really focus inward. The whole point is to do something that's going to be very healing to you. Don't make any huge decisions. If you feel like you're kind of loopy, just, make sure you're in a safe place with, where you're not going to act out in ways that are going to be harmful to, people or that sort of thing. Or just be aware of that. If you feel it, just go, you know what, this is temporary. I'm not going to take action on it. But, I say, these are also the most powerful times to take advantage of this nexus of energies to come. So this is a great time to do ritual and think about what it is you want to accomplish. Think about your greatest fantasy, and what it is that will truly make you happy, and just spend time and intend that. Say, this is what I'm going to intend. I'm going to use this time for the eclipse, to use it to focus on what I really want, even if that goes against your fears and your feelings, right? Go opposite of your fears and your feelings if they're giving you a hard time, and focus on the opposite, the things that will really give you and the people around you blessings. Okay, so just those kind of basic things. All right, so the lower degrees, yeah, I wouldn't so much focus on the degrees. They do come into play. And like I said, lower degrees sometimes means that the planet is asleep. But also, I've also heard that the lower degrees means that the planet is going to have huge impact on the chart. So, yeah, it's, again, that's something I haven't mastered yet, so I can't answer that question. But it is a great question. I'll look into that. Okay, so the people are saying nice things about me here, and they're laughing along with me, so I appreciate that. Okay, again, I'm looking for questions, and I'm not seeing anything. So Romney on Germany says, what about Capricorn? So I'm not going to do, like, take questions on specific charts or stuff like that. That's a whole other thing. But I will take other questions about other things, but since I don't see any questions, we can go ahead and wrap things up. So yeah, I think I've said what I need to say here for this. This was really fun for me. Let me do some ads in case you want an astrological reading from me. Now you have an idea of the kinds of things that can come up in a reading and what you can find out, how you can find the negative aspects of within a chart and turn it around and make it super positive. How a chart will say you're going to be the biggest failure in the world, and you can turn that around and make it yourself into the hugest success, and the vice versa, how your chart says you're going to be the most famous person in the world and how it's going to make you, a total failure as you get older. You can turn all these things around. A chart doesn't tell you what's going to happen in your life. The only thing a chart tells you is what the influences are on you. It's up to you how you choose to react. And so my job as an astrologer is to say, here are the things that are working for you. Let's just take this lever and really just crank on this one lever. Here's this thing's already working for you. Let's get these other things out of the way that are trying to get in the way. That's my job. And I've seen it in my life, is that when you know where to put the pressure on in your chart and what to do, what mantras to do, what rituals to do, what attitudes to have, what actions to take. And again, just knowing your Aruda, knowing what your reflection is, that in and of itself, it's done wonders for me. It's made me so much more successful. And I'm in fact, today I just got a bunch of new tunics, fancy tunics, so that I can, cut the sleeves off and, really put my Aruda out there for on video. So anyway, so I'm going to do some ads, and then we'll see if there's anything left to do or say. Okay, so very good. See if there's any last minute questions that I can answer. Joey wants to play, asks, asks, can I ask your most transformational suggestion for one to engage in from a shamanic perspective? Ritual, meditation, ceremony, healing. That's, what is the one thing? Okay, let me see if I can honestly answer your question. Because what I'm going to go in and say, listen, there's no one answer to that question because I have to look at your chart and the blah, blah, blah. But let me see if I can answer that question. What is the one thing that I can say to you that is most important from a shamanic perspective is adopt the correct assumption about your relationship to the universe and to yourself. And that is just accept the understanding that everything in the universe wants to help you and wants to help you achieve your deepest fulfillment and satisfaction. Everything else that I do, like if I were to work with you and if I were to look at your chart and let's say I decided the best thing for you was to work with your Dharma Devata, then I would create a ritual so that you could align yourself with your unconscious mind so that you could follow your highest path. If I saw in your chart that was what was most important, like in my chart, literally the most important thing in my chart is to empower my Aruda. I would give you a ritual based on what your Aruda was in your chart. If I saw in your chart that what you really needed to do was to go inward and meditate, I would teach you that. If I saw that what you needed was energy work, like I do, I have my moon is debilitated in such a way where I leak energy if I'm not careful, then I would give you, I would either teach you energy work or I would give you links to go get the DVD for the Celestial Qigong. I worked with somebody yesterday and we were looking at things and I ended up changing the ritual for her and she immediately felt in her body, a change. So I can't answer your question, but if you have to force me into one thing, I would say make sure that everything you do, everything you think, every action you take, every decision you make, every belief you adopt is based on the assumption that the universe loves you, everything in the universe wants to help you, and that if you align yourself with your deepest soul desire and follow that rule, everything will work to empower you. If you work against that belief, if you work out of fear and you erode that trust between yourself and the universe, then you will have challenges. That is the most important thing I can say. Okay. All right, again, I'm not going to take any questions about astrology in general. I don't have time for that. Oak Tree 69, I do have a Skype. The way I do this is if to get a reading, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com and purchase a reading. If you live within the United States, then I do it by phone because I have to go through multiple screens. If you live in another country, then I do it by Skype. So I will give either one of those depending on where you live. Joy wants to play, says some very nice things. You are a great man and have tremendous insight, and truth emanates deeply from you. Thank you for all you do. What a very sweet thing to say. Thank you so much. Every now and then I will let a compliment come through because I like them. So I'm getting ready to get off the phone here. Let's see. Loki Ward wants to know how to, short answer, you want to figure out how to find the Aruda. That is very easily found. All you have to do is just type in Vedic Astrology Aruda Lagna. Okay? And you can figure out how to do that in any chart. Okay, so that's it for now. For me, I'm going to eat and get ready for my next call, which is coming up here pretty soon. Thank you, everybody. I'm so glad that people showed up. I had so much fun. This was so much fun. I knew it was going to be an interesting chart, but I had no idea it was going to be as impactful as it was. So let us all, go into this, regardless of how we feel. We have to have compassion for everybody. Let us go into this this eclipse, and let us focus on wishing the best. We know now, regardless of what side of the political spectrum on, we know now what Donald Trump's highest reflection is, what his highest vibration is. Let us go into that wishing that for him. And let us go into that wishing the same for us. Take that same attitude, because Rahu wants to eclipse all that is, really working for us, and wants us to focus on all. He wants to do two things. He either wants to stimulate you so that you will act out of all of your deepest unconscious garbage, because that's the fastest way to enlightenment. Because when you do that, then Saturn is going to come in and put his thumb on you and make you pay a price for that, and then you're going to wake up. Everybody's going to become enlightened. Everybody. I don't care how horrible they are. They will all become enlightened. If they take actions that cause them and other people harm, Saturn is going to squish them for however many lifetimes it takes until they wake up and go, man, I want to be the opposite of that. Or Rahu is saying to you, here's all the garbage. Do you really want this? Do you really want this garbage? That's the way to go at it. If you feel uncomfortable going through it, just go, man, all the stuff I'm feeling right now is just all that garbage within me. I release that. I release that. I release that. And then when the sun comes back out, then imagine yourself becoming that new person. Let this be a complete transformation of your ego on all levels. Okay, so that's it. I got to go. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been really wonderful. And I will talk to you guys again let's see, where am I looking for? I will talk to you guys again very, very soon. Thank you so much.